In 2001, two brothers, only 12 and 13 years old, confessed to brutally killing their father. It seems like an open and shut case. A murder confession usually means the end of the story. Yet, more than 20 years later, people still struggle to make up their minds, and this remains a very controversial case. Were these two baby-faced little boys truly responsible for the murder of their father? Or was there someone else behind the scenes pulling the strings? The detectives on the case uncovered shocking, twisted details that still bring people to different conclusions and opinions. Was justice really served, or was this a complete failure of the system? This is the shocking and controversial case of the King brothers and the murder of Terry King. Welcome back to another episode of Hot on the Case. If this is your first time joining us for an investigation here at Hot on the Case, we talk all things true crime with a focus on the unsolved and unexplained. So if mysteries are your thing, please consider following the show wherever you're listening, whether that's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or if you're watching the video version on YouTube. Please do not forget to like, rate, and review the show because it really, really does help. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for being here. My name is Brianna, and I'm hot on the case. This is a case that I am shocked is not more well known because this case is filled with twists and turns that had my jaw on the floor the entire time I was researching it. Just a very quick disclaimer, because this is probably the least well-known case that we've covered on Hot on the Case to date, information on this case was really hard to find and especially very hard to verify. All the information I found for this video is information that I found online and I believe to be accurate. If I got anything wrong, please kindly let me know in the comments. Terry Lee King was born on April 17th, 1961. In 1985, Terry met Janet French and they began dating. When Terry was 23 years old, him and Janet moved in together. The couple never married, but they would be together for 8 years and start a family. They had two sons, Derek, born on March 4th, 1988, and a second son named Alex, born only 14 months later on July 12th, 1989. From the start, the couple really struggled financially, and as we all know, money problems can cause some really stressful times in a relationship. By 1992, when the boys were only like 3 and 2 years old, Terry and Janet's relationship had completely fallen apart. Despite not being fully together anymore, the two continued to live under the same roof, probably because neither of them could afford to move out. Details on their relationship timeline at this time is really fuzzy. This is a detail that had really conflicting information, with many sources saying that Terry and Janet were still very much together. One thing that we know for certain, though, is during this time, Janet gave birth to twin boys, fathered by another man. And this is a part in the case that I think really shows Terry's character and the kind of man and father that he was. Despite not being the twins' biological father, Terry still stepped up and helped co-parent all 4 boys. But as time went on, it became more and more obvious that raising 4 children on a tight budget wasn't working. Janet stayed home with all 4 kids while Terry was working long, grueling hours, barely pulling in enough money to keep the lights on and to put food on the table. Janet was really struggling being a full-time single mom to 4 boys, all under 5 years old. And as every year went by, Janet inched closer to her breaking point. And then in 1994, Janet left Terry and all 4 of her boys. She just left. She met another man, married him, and moved to Kentucky, and barely ever saw her 4 children ever again. I sympathize slightly with Janet. I'm not a mother yet, but I can only assume the complex feelings that she was feeling at this time. They're already struggling financially. She's a full-time stay-at-home mom to 4 boys. I mean, it must have been really hard. What I can't understand is her abandoning her children. But still, it's a very complex situation. But to a child, it's not complicated at all. Derek and Alex were only 6 and 5 years old, the twins barely 3. How do you explain to these 4 babies how they can go from having a mom one day to no longer having a mom the next. This is definitely the first big traumatic event that happened to the King boys, but it certainly would not be the last. And Terry is only struggling even more now. The family was already really struggling to make ends meet, and now he's essentially lost his childcare. After Janet left, Terry even got caught writing bad checks just to put food on the table for his family, and he was coming to terms that he couldn't raise 4 children by himself. And it was not long later in 1994, Terry learned about the Heritage Christian Academy, a crisis home for children. Heartbroken, but knowing he couldn't provide the life his family needed, Terry made the gut-wrenching decision to place all 4 boys in the academy. Terry was introduced to the idea of open adoption, and though Terry saw this as an unselfish decision for the boys' well-being, it was still devastating. And then, only 8 months after the boys were placed in the academy, the home shut down due to financial issues. This meant that the 4 brothers would be separated. The twins were placed together in a foster home and were later adopted by a great family, but Derek and Alex were split up. Derek went to live with his new foster parents, Frank Lay and his wife Nancy. Alex, however, struggled in his new home. He cried constantly, and within a month, his family gave up on him, sending him back to live with his father, Terry. Terry was still broke, but him and Alex made it work. Terry still couldn't afford childcare, so Alex spent most of his time in the break room at his father's job while his dad worked the night shifts. It wasn't ideal, but at least the 2 of them were together. Alex was a really good kid. He was bright, shy, soft-spoken. He loved books. He was really, really smart. And at this time, Alex really respected his father's hard work and sacrifices. And even though this was an unconventional arrangement, Terry's boss allowed it to continue, and so this became their routine for the next handful of years. Out of all the King brothers, Derek definitely got the short end of the stick. His mother abandoned him, and then he felt like his father abandoned him as well when he placed him in that Christian academy, just for that to not work out as well. So Derek is placed in a new home, but he's separated from his 3 younger brothers. His twin half-brothers were placed together in a stable home. His dad and his other brother Alex had been living together for the past handful of years without him. The Lay family, who had brought him in, didn't feel like family, and it didn't feel like a home there. Derek started to act out, rebel, and he started getting in trouble at school. Derek was really popular at school. He was very outgoing. He was very smart. He did have ADHD, so his foster family felt that he was becoming a bit of a handful. By the summer of 2001, Terry and Alex were in a really good place. Terry had saved up enough money to get a car and rent a new home. At 12 years old, Alex was thriving. Him and his dad were creating a home that they loved. But in September, that stability was disrupted when Nancy Lay, Derek's foster mom, called his biological mom, Janet, to say that 13-year-old Derek had become too much to handle. He was having too many emotional outbursts. There was this one instance where Derek cut up his own mattress because he got really upset. And recently, he started setting small fires. The Lay family just wanted him gone. Derek had began to disrupt their life and disrupt their family. They were even considering putting Derek in military school just to get rid of him. And when Terry heard about this, reportedly, he got really upset. So he went and he took his son Derek back in as well. Now, Derek was happy to be back with his family, but let's be real. This kid has been bounced around so much that it definitely had to take a toll. This move meant that Derek went from living in a suburban area with tons of friends nearby and things to do to moving to a more rural area where he felt isolated. Him and his brother Alex got really close, even though they had been reunited after 7 years apart. They attended Ransom Middle School that fall. They were both extremely academically gifted, but Derek really struggled to settle into his new life. On November 14th, 2001, Terry spoke to Janet, the boy's mother, on the phone, and he told her that he felt like Derek was finally adjusting. Just 2 days later, everything fell apart. On November 16th, 2001, Terry called the sheriff's office to report his 2 sons missing. He last saw them that day when he dropped them off at school, but they never came home from school. He didn't think they had run away because they didn't really pack a bag. They didn't pack anything. The only thing that looked missing was a Game Boy. Days passed. Thanksgiving came and went, and still there was no signs of Terry's sons, Derek and Alex. Terry was desperate, even missing a scheduled visit with his own father just so he could stay and search for his sons. Terry grew frustrated with law enforcement, feeling like they weren't doing enough. He even went to the local news station to criticize the sheriff's office. And then, on November 24th, after being missing for like a week, Derek was found near the woods near some girl's house and brought home. The next day, Alex was returned as well. But the nightmare wasn't over. That very night, just after 1 a.m., Terry's house went up in flames. Firefighters battled the flames for over half an hour before they could enter the house. Inside, they found 40-year-old Terry King dead in his recliner. His head had been brutally bashed in. There was blood everywhere, and the fire had clearly been set to cover up the crime.
But he does have some type of wound to the head. Like I said, we just don't know if the fire could cause his head to pump like an eggshell, or if he's been struck, or what. I don't know what we got at this point. I hear you. Flipping it off as a crime scene.
And then they realized that Terry's sons were missing. Where were Derek and Alex? The investigators were baffled. Who would want to kill this struggling single father? And why were the boys missing again? The next afternoon, Derek and Alex were brought into the sheriff's office by a family friend, and that's where things took a dark and shocking turn. The baby-faced 12 and 13-year-old boys were there to turn themselves in and confess to the murder of their father. So how did things go so wrong so fast? Where had the boys been for the past 2 days, and who was this family friend that brought them to the police station to confess to murder and arson? The brothers were questioned separately from each other. They weren't together. They also did not have an adult or lawyer present. Derek, the 13-year-old, claimed that he was the one that killed his father, but that he did so in self-defense. He claimed that his father was a terrible, abusive man, and that day he threw his little brother Alex across the room. And Derek, to protect his younger brother, attacked his father with an aluminum baseball bat. And that is how his father, Terry King, ended up dead. The only issue? This story did not align with the evidence at the scene. Terry King was found bludgeoned while lying back in his recliner. A cup of coffee was next to him, his feet was propped up on the love seat in front of him, and his arms were crossed in his lap. Terry King was killed while he slept, not in the middle of attacking his child. And when confronted with that evidence, Derek changed his story. He said that on that night, November 25th, while his father Terry slept in that recliner, he snuck up behind him with an aluminum baseball bat and swung it at his father's head repeatedly until he was sure that he was dead. Alex, his little 12-year-old brother, stood nearby watching their father be murdered by his older brother just in silence. And after the attack, the two brothers set their house on fire. They then ran to the nearby woods and then stayed in the woods for the past 2 nights. 12-year-old Alex also told the original self-defense story, but when he was also confronted with the same evidence, changed his story as well. Alex pretty much told the same story as his brother. The only detail that Alex added was that it was his idea to kill their father, and that Derek was just the one to swing the bat. Now, who was this family friend that brought the boys in to confess to murder? To answer that question, we're gonna have to go back a little bit. Back before Derek moved back with Terry, back when it was just Terry and Alex. At this time, things were definitely better for Terry and Alex financially, but it wasn't better completely. Terry was still struggling to make ends meet, overworking himself to the bone, taking on overtime hours, and wasn't able to be around all the time for his son Alex. Alex was getting older at this time. He didn't just want to sit around in his father's break room every single night. So Terry got some help from a good friend of his that he met when they lived in the same trailer park. a man named Ricky Chavis. Ricky was a local mechanic, a handyman, the kind of guy that everyone saw as like really cool. Many of the neighborhood kids looked up to Ricky, and his home quickly became like the go-to hangout spot for all the local boys. Terry and Ricky quickly became really good friends, and Ricky agreed to help out the struggling single father Terry and watch his son Alex whenever Terry needed the help. Ricky was a really well-known guy in the area. Everyone knew Ricky. Everyone liked Ricky. Ricky was the kind of guy that helped everyone in the neighborhood when they had car problems. All the kids in the neighborhood loved Ricky. He seemed like a great dude, so Terry trusted him with his son. And this was the kind of situation that seemed like it benefited everyone. Terry didn't have to feel guilty anymore working as much. Alex wasn't as lonely all the time, and now he had this like cool older male figure to hang out with him. It seemed like a win-win. And then when Derek came back to live with Terry, Ricky agreed to watch over him as well. A little bit about Derek and Alex's father, Terry. Terry was a really like quirky, fun-loving man, but he could be strict on his two sons. That is what is said, at least in most reportings of this case, while others describe Terry as just a struggling single father doing his best to raise his two sons to be well-mannered members of society, to raise his sons to be good men, and that does come with structure and rules. But let's say for Derek, who's 13 years old, he already felt abandoned by his mother and his father when he was sent away to that Catholic home for children, which shuts down. So then he's separated from his brothers. He's sent to live with a new family who don't want him either because he's just going through a lot emotionally and mentally. Also just going through a bit of a rebellious phase like every other teenager in the history ever. So they don't want him either. And they send him away too. And then he's sent to go live back with his father. Having a bunch of rules just immediately thrown at him could feel really overwhelming and unfairly strict. Like, I get that. Not even mentioning that Derek is finally reunited with his father and brother just to find out that they've already been living together for the past handful of years without him. And his father never went to go get him too. I mean, that must have been really, really hard. And apparently due to Derek and then even Alex's presumed unfair mistreatment by their father, they both began to resent Terry. They didn't really want anything to do with their father, but you know who did let the boys do whatever they wanted, rule-free? Their buddy down the street, Ricky Chavis. Ricky let the boys eat junk food, play video games, watch whatever they wanted on TV whenever they wanted. That right there is already the key to like any teenage boy's heart. But it wasn't the end of it. Ricky let the boys drink alcohol at his house, smoke cigarettes, and even smoked marijuana with them. He was actually supplying all of these things to these children. So Ricky not only let the boys do whatever they wanted without rules, but he's treating them like adults and introducing them to all of these adult things like drugs and alcohol. And when the boys ran away from their father Terry's house shortly before Terry was murdered, guess where they were? At Ricky Chavis's house. And this is such a huge betrayal because Ricky is supposed to be Terry's friend. They were like good friends for the past like 5 or 6 years. This is his friend that he trusted to watch over his sons while he's working overtime just to make ends meet. Now, not only is Terry's friend, Ricky, going behind his back and the rules that he set for his children, but Ricky's taking it a step farther and he's giving his children illegal substances. And then he's hiding his children from him. That kind of betrayal is insane, let alone super inappropriate because remember, Derek and Alex are 13 and 12 years old. When his children ran away, Terry asked his friend Ricky if he saw his missing boys or knew where they were, and Ricky lied straight to his face. Ricky even lied to the police when they came to Ricky's trailer looking for the two brothers. And after Derek was found at like a girlfriend's house, Ricky brought Alex back to Terry and again lied right to his face, and he claimed that Alex called him from a payphone and asked him to come pick him up. Terry is very suspicious of his good old friend Ricky at this point. He believes that his friend is lying to him. It's possible that he was even suspicious that Ricky was maybe giving his sons drugs and alcohol. I mean, most parents pick up on that kind of thing. Or maybe Terry began to think that the relationship had gotten inappropriate. Terry wanted his boys to cut ties with Ricky completely, just take a step back, at least take a break. And Terry was really serious about this too. He even reached out to the boys' school and removed Ricky as someone who was allowed to pick the boys up from school. Terry definitely had reason to be concerned. I mean, obviously, from what I've already told you, but it would soon come out that there was something even more dark and disturbing going on. On the night of November 25th, shortly after Terry was reunited with his sons after they ran away, Terry took Derek and Alex all over town to take down the missing persons posters that he had put up while he was searching for them. And I guess Terry had put up a lot of missing persons posters because they were out really late. They didn't get home until a little bit after midnight. Only 1 hour later, Terry's house was up in flames and his body was inside, bludgeoned to death. And then his 2 sons were brought into the sheriff's office to confess to murder. And who brought them in? Well, of course, it was Ricky Chavis. Right away, the officers felt like there was something not right here, that there was more to the story. Both brothers claimed that they chose to end their father's life because he was very abusive, mostly mentally abusive. But when asked by the officers questioning them to describe the abuse, both boys actually had a really hard time describing what their father did that was abusive. Alex, the younger brother, said in his initial interview, and this is super telling, that they didn't know that they were being abused until someone in their life told them that what they were experiencing at the hands of their father was extreme abuse. And the person that was manipulating these impressionable children into thinking that their father was abusing them, well, of course, it was Ricky Chavis.
You said that you'd done mental abuse.
The investigators were floored. What is going on here? And what part did Ricky play in all of this? A look into Ricky's background showed the disturbing truth. In 1984, Ricky Chavis was convicted of molesting 2 13-year-old boys. There it was. A clear motive why Ricky wanted to get close to Terry's 2 young sons, why these boys ran away to his house when Terry wanted them to cut off ties with him, why he convinced these 2 young children their father was a terrible man. The deeper you look into this case, the darker it becomes. The detectives did a search of Alex and Derek's belongings, and what they found was a mountain of evidence that suggested that 40-year-old Ricky Chavis was grooming and molesting 12-year-old Alex King. Alex kept a journal where he documented the love that he thought he had for his father's adult friend Ricky. This poor child really believed that him and this grown man in his 40s were in a relationship and that they were in love. Alex documented that he met Ricky when he was only 7 years old, and that he was statutory essayed by Ricky for the first time not long after his 12th birthday. He wrote that before he met Ricky, he was straight, but now he was gay. Like I said, as you peel back the layers of this case, the more disturbing it gets every time. First, you believe you're dealing with a case of 2 little boys murdering their father, and then you come to realize that there's a manipulative adult in their life convincing them of things that aren't true. Then, that this 40-year-old man has groomed a 12-year-old into thinking that they're in love. Then you uncover the possibility that this 40-year-old man was actually the one pulling the strings, and maybe was even the one to swing the bat. When Ricky Chavis was questioned after bringing the King brothers into the police station to turn themselves in, he claimed that the boys had spent the past 2 nights in the woods before calling him on a payphone and confessed what they did, but that is not the case. The King brothers, one way or another, ended up at Ricky Chavis's house shortly after their father was killed and their home was set aflame. And Ricky didn't immediately turn them in, and he actually offered to wash their clothes, hence tampering with evidence. That very day, the boys were charged with killing their father and committing arson. 2 weeks later, after their arrest on December 11th, Ricky Chavis was also arrested as an accessory to murder after the fact and for tampering with evidence. And that exact same day, a grand jury indicted the King brothers on first-degree murder. There was this big back and forth whether or not the King brothers were going to be tried as juveniles or as adults. Ultimately, it was decided that they would both be tried as adults, and if convicted for first-degree murder, the boys were facing life in an adult prison. While awaiting trial, the boys sat in a cell in the county jail. And while awaiting their trial, the judge heard a rumor going around that the boys had changed their story again. This time, Alex and Derek were alleging that Ricky Chavis was the one that murdered their father, and then convinced them to take the blame for it, because since they were juveniles, they could just claim it was self-defense. Everyone would believe them. They would get a slap on the wrist, be released, and then the 3 of them, Alex, Derek, and Ricky, could live together happily ever after. Derek and Alex only chose to change their story now because a slap on the wrist didn't look like it was going to happen. No, they were facing life behind bars in an adult prison. The boys claimed on the night of their father's murder, they snuck out the house and Ricky picked them up and drove them back to Terry's house, where the boys let Ricky inside by unlocking the door. Instead of Derek swinging the bat, Ricky was the one who killed Terry, while the boys waited outside. Afterwards, Ricky set the fire, then drove the boys back to his place, and only then told them what happened to their father, and told them exactly what to say if the police ever questioned them. And then the 2 boys rehearsed that story over and over for 2 nights.
He pulled me inside, into his bedroom, and told me that there was a fight between him and Dad. He was saying how bad it was, saying it was terrible. And he was saying that if we took the blame tonight, we would get off on self-defense because we were juveniles.
And did you rehearse what you were to say to the police?
Yes, sir. We were talking about it almost constantly. Well, basically constantly, during the time that we spent at his house.
This is actually a story that many of the detectives on the case actually do believe, because they always felt like Alex and Derek's story not only felt rehearsed, but were also full of inconsistencies. For one thing, due to the evidence at the scene, the police knew 100% that the fire was set using an accelerant, but the boys repeatedly denied using an accelerant while recounting their confession. I mean, why not? Why would they not admit to doing that when they're already confessing to murder and arson? I mean, it doesn't make sense. And also, their stories sounded rehearsed and sounded like something that didn't come out of the minds and the mouths of children. In their stories, in their initial interviews, the boys used words that didn't sound like words that kids would use. And with the boys' new confession, Ricky Chavis was also charged with the murder of Terry King. But the charges against Derek and Alex were not dropped. In a controversial move, Derek and Alex would go to trial for killing their father, and completely separate from that, Ricky Chavis would also go on trial for killing Terry King. 3 people going to trial all for swinging the same bat. I hate when prosecutors do this. I've seen this in other cases, very rare, but I have seen it, where in a case, if they have two suspects, instead of harrowing in on one theory, one suspect, both will be charged and go to trial completely separately from each other. It's one thing if they think that the killers acted together as like accomplices, but this is a completely separate thing. And I personally don't think it's right. I don't even think it should be legal, especially if you're talking about children. You need to pick one suspect, one theory. Ricky was the first to go to trial, and his trial began in August of 2002. The boy's new confession was the main evidence against him. Alex also took the stand and testified against Ricky. And once Ricky's trial finished up, the judge chose to seal the verdict and only reveal it after the King brothers went to trial. Not even Ricky Chavis knew if he was found guilty of murder or not. And then it was Derek and Alex's turn to go to trial, and they were tried together for first-degree murder. These two little boys captivated the nation. People were fascinated by this case and shocked that these were the faces on trial for such a terrible crime. At the end of the trial, a shocking verdict. These two young boys were found guilty of the lesser crime of second-degree murder and arson. They were still facing life in prison with a minimum sentence of 22 years.
We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the indictment. Guilty of second-degree murder, a lesser included offense, without a weapon.
Even more shocking was when Ricky Chavis's verdict was unsealed. His jury found him not guilty for the murder of Terry King. He was also acquitted for molesting Alex King, despite, I think, a decent amount of evidence against him. He was found guilty of being an accessory after the fact and for tampering with evidence. But I swear, the jaw-dropping moments do not end here. The jury on Alex and Derek's murder case after the trial was over openly admitted that they felt that Ricky Chavis was the one responsible for the murder, but convicted 2 children because they weren't completely sure. And they chose the lesser degree of second-degree murder for opening the door for Ricky to go in and kill their father. This was a huge F-up by the jury, a huge miscarriage of justice and proof that these children got an unfair trial. So the judge chose to overthrow their convictions, and instead of the King brothers getting a retrial, the judge forced the defense and the prosecution into a mediation, meaning that the 2 parties would have to come to a resolution instead of go to trial. And that resolution was that the King brothers, now 14 and 13 years old, would plead guilty to third-degree murder and spend like 7 or 8 years in a juvenile center. A much better deal than the minimum of 22 years in an adult prison that the boys were originally facing. And during this period of time, the boys' biological mom, Janet, came out the woodwork, speaking to the media that this was an injustice. She didn't think that the boys had any adults working in their best interests, and that they didn't fully understand what they were pleading guilty to and what it meant. In 2005, when Alex was 15 years old, he was charged with trying to escape juvie. Him and another inmate at the juvenile center put pillows under their blankets to make it look like they were sleeping in their beds. Then they tried to crawl through vents in the ceiling, but they weren't able to find a way out and were found by a prison guard in a classroom the next day. Alex would receive an additional 5 years on probation after his release for trying to escape. And Alex was released on parole on April 9th, 2008 at the age of 18 after serving 6 years. And Derek was released 3 days after his 20th birthday on March 7th, 2009 after serving 7 years. And the younger King brother, Alex, really struggled after his release. He violated his parole in 2011 after leaving the scene of a car accident. He got married and seemed happy for a while, but divorced after only 3 years. And then at only 35 years old, Alex King passed away almost exactly 1 year ago to the date of upload on April 23rd, 2024 from a drug overdose. Derek also got married and had a child, but also sadly got divorced. Reports say that Derek has been in and out of prison for a variety of different crimes, also struggled with substance use, but has since reportedly cleaned up his life. and has stayed out of the public eye. And as for Ricky Chavis, he still remains in prison for the crimes that he was convicted of. He received 30 years in prison, meaning that he's set to be released in 2031, which is really not that far away. In this case, there's only 3 possibilities. Only one of 3 things happened. Either Derek and Alex murdered their father, Terry, or Derek and Alex murdered their father, Terry, after being manipulated by Ricky Chavis into doing so, or that Ricky Chavis murdered Terry King. I feel like I could talk about this case and all of its theories for hours. I personally am not sure what I believe, because I personally do not believe that we've heard 100% of the truth. The only thing that I'm sure of is that Ricky Chavis had some kind of involvement. I don't think that if Ricky Chavis never entered the King brothers' life, that Terry King would have died. I think that Terry King would still be alive today. How far the involvement of Ricky Chavis goes, though, I'm unsure. Terry King seemed like a great father who was truly doing his best, and I don't want Terry to get lost in his own case. Terry was a quirky, fun-loving guy who faced a lot of hurt and heartbreak in his life, but still always did everything he could do to provide for his family. Terry absolutely did not deserve what happened to him, and even though it's extremely likely that his sons played some kind of part in his tragic death, Terry's family still chose to put "I love you, Alex and Derek" on Terry's tombstone because they believed, no matter what happened, that that's what Terry would have wanted. And if that doesn't tell you about the kind of man and father that Terry King was, I don't know what will. At the end of the day, this case is as controversial as it is tragic. Some see Alex and Derek as cold-blooded killers who knew exactly what they were doing, while others see them as victims. 2 boys who never stood a chance and were manipulated by someone much older and someone far more dangerous. And then there's Ricky Chavis, the wild card in all of this, the shady character. Was Ricky Chavis just a bystander, or was he the one pulling the strings the entire time? A father was brutally murdered. 2 children went to prison, and even now, after all of these years, after decades, people still can't seem to agree on who's really to blame. Let me know all your thoughts, opinions in the comments, because I'm sure this is one that people are going to feel really strongly one way or the other, and this is a case that people will be arguing about for years to come. As always, thank you so much for watching to this week's episode of Hot on the Case. Please be sure to like, subscribe, follow, rate, review, like the show wherever you're watching, and I will see you guys all next week when we are hot on the case once again.